Whether you're looking for answers to specific life questions or simply hoping to become the best version of you possible, welcome to the Mental Breakdown and Psychreg podcast, where we offer insight, information, and strategies based upon research and years of practice as psychologists. So sit back, have a listen, and get connected with our hosts, Dr. Berney and Dr. Richard Marshall. Welcome back. This week we're going to focus on depression. We've done this before with ADHD. Right. Mm-hmm. We've talked about this for a little while.
Right. Yeah, we've discussed devoting a week. We're going to devote a whole week to the discussion of depression, a discussion about depression. And we've talked about doing this for some time, and I'm glad we're finally launching one.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. Yeah, so we're going to, throughout the course of the week, we're going to hit some different topics, very, very specific points about it. And then we're going to end the week with our long podcast on Saturday. We're going to talk in a little bit more detail about depression, but especially focus on treatment.
Treatment, right. Yeah. Treatment of depression.
Yeah, because that requires a little bit more detail.
It's going to take a little bit more time.
Yeah. Right. But we're going to start out today talking about depression in general, because I think that many people look at depression and consider depression, and it's a very common mood condition, state. And we don't really think about how complex depression is.
That's right.
It's not just sadness.
And it's true that, it's also true that, maybe this is a question, in the course of your life, most people are going to have at least one bout of depression. Right. And some will have more than a bout of depression.
Right.
So it's really a common disorder. And sometimes it just sort of sneaks up on you. It comes out of nowhere.
Right.
When there's nothing to explain why you have these feelings.
Right.
But you're right. We tend to think of depression, and we tend to talk about it as though it's a chemical imbalance. Everybody think, well, it's a chemical imbalance. That has become sort of a folklore, metaphor, but it certainly is an oversimplification.
Right.
Okay. One of the reasons I'm glad that we're starting with depression and that we're going to take this look at it is it is a complex disorder that most of us underestimate.
Right.
Even most professionals underestimate its complexity and therefore how to deal with it.
Right. Yeah. So you brought up a couple of really important things there that I think we should touch on briefly as we're getting started into the conversation that we have for today. And that is one, that most of us are going to experience depression at one point or another. Now, the depression that you experience may not be major depressive disorder, the diagnostic or the DSM diagnosis of depression. Right. If you lose a loved one, if you end a relationship, or if someone else ends a relationship with you, you are likely to experience a depressed mood. And again, as you said, we all at some point experience that.
Right. We all experience loss. We all childbirth. For example, as common as that is, many women experience postpartum depression.
Right.
Certainly a kind of depression. But you're right. We're talking about everything from having a case of the blues, but not clinical depression.
Right.
But this certain sadness comes over you, and it might be due to something chemically that changes in your brain, as what happens in childbirth. Or it could be just the loss of a loved one, a pet, for example, or some other traumatic event. We have hurricanes here in Florida.
Right.
And after hurricanes, some houses get destroyed, roofs get pulled off, people lose all the food in their house because you don't have electricity for a week. And so those kinds of events can also produce the symptoms of depression.
Right.
So we're talking broadly about this mood change.
Yes. And the second quick point is in regards to the whole thing about chemical imbalance. Right. We refer to depression as a chemical imbalance, especially bipolar disorder as a chemical imbalance. Right. And those, that's at best, it's an oversimplification.
Right.
Because, and I think that derives from I think it derives from the medical community to say it's a chemical imbalance, and that's why we give medication.
Well, and the SSRIs have been so successful. They're so effective.
Right.
And they've been so successful that we sort of think, okay, this is a serotonin problem.
Right.
SSRI being selective serotonin reuptake. So we do tend to oversimplify it and say, well, it's a serotonin problem.
Yeah.
But it is far more. It is far more than a serotonin problem.
Right. And as we'll talk about on Saturday, there's some new research coming out about SSRIs and medication that will make us wonder if they are as effective as they've once said they were.
Give us pause.
Yeah.
Right. Mm-hmm.
So.
Well, can't wait to get to that topic.
Yes.
But there's a lot to do between now and then.
Yes.
Okay.
So today we're going to start out with talking about how complex depression is. And as we've already said, the spectrum that is depression ranges from, just being down, failing a test can make you feel down and sad or a little distressed, all the way up to, of course we have all the way up to suicidal depression that, you're contemplating, harming yourself and
debilitating. You can't get out of bed.
Right.
You're just so.
I mean, there's depression that causes catatonia where you can't even move.
Right.
So there's a broad spectrum of presentation, so let's talk a little bit about the symptoms. We all know sadness.
Right.
Sad mood. But one of the other, when we think about how the diagnosis works in the DSM, one of these two symptoms have to be present.
Right.
Either you have to be sad most of the day, nearly every day for at least 2 weeks,
Right.
or you have to experience this thing called anhedonia.
Right.
Which I love that word.
Yes, I do too. You remember, there are certain words that you remember discovering for the first time.
Right.
The first time I saw that word, I said, ooh, I like this word. And
Yeah.
you never forget it. You never forget the meaning.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So anhedonia, the root is
Hedonism. Right.
So it's pleasure seeking, and when you put an in front of it, that means the absence of. So it's anhedonia, the absence of pleasure seeking behaviors. And so when you have anhedonia, that's that pathological boredom where you don't want to do anything, even things that usually bring you lots of joy and lots of happiness and are pleasurable for you. You don't even want to do that.
Right.
But one of those two have to be present for it to be a diagnosis of major depressive disorder.
That's right. And we're talking about weeks, a week's duration of these things. You can have a bad night's sleep, and you're kind of down the next day, and you're just kind of flat. You have a flat affect. That's not depression.
Right.
Okay. Bad night's sleep, or things aren't going as well as you'd like for them to go, and you're down for a few days. We're talking about a more persistent problem, whether it's sadness or lack of pleasure,
Right.
And that they are different.
Right.
We're talking about a duration that lasts for several weeks.
Right.
Okay.
And it lasts several weeks, and it's not directly caused by or associated with bereavement. So, if a loved one in your family dies, you're going to experience a lot of these symptoms we're about to talk about.
Right.
But if it's within, a couple of months of a loved one dying, then actually, diagnostically according to our DSM Bible, it does not count as a major depressive disorder.
Right. Mm-hmm.
So, so you have to either be sad and or have that anhedonia for most of the day, nearly every day, for about 2 weeks. Mm-hmm. All right. Now, there's other symptoms that have to be present. What they call psychomotor agitation.
Go ahead.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
So this is, either one of two things going to happen, and when it comes to the three of the big symptoms of depression, what you're looking for is a change, because psychomotor agitation, you're going to find that a person is either going to become more fidgety, more restless, more pacing or that kind of stuff, or they could become, as I said earlier, catatonic, where they don't move at all.
Right.
But it's a big change from what they typically do. Eating, feeling hungry.
Right.
Some people eat
Right.
more when they're depressed, and some people don't eat when
Right.
they're depressed. And again, it's a big change. Sleep. Some people become
Right.
hyper somnolence, where they sleep more, and then others don't sleep at all. They become more. Are just unable to fall asleep because
They get insomnia. They can't go to sleep. They can't
Right.
fall asleep. So, and what I like, go ahead and finish.
No, that's it. So with those
there's three.
Movement, eating, and sleeping. When it comes to those three, when it comes with depression, you're going to see a change in the behavior that you typically experience. So you're either more of it or far less of it.
But as you explain these three big, you have a change in mood, psychomotor agitation, and then you have these three areas that are affected.
Right.
And you can begin to see that there's a lot of different ways that this can express itself.
Exactly.
Right? And so then you begin to get this feeling that, so it may not be a single thing,
Right.
single entity.
Right. Yeah. So absolutely. So this introduces a lot of variability in the way in which it presents. So another symptom is of course guilt, and again, you have to be careful that a lot of the symptoms you're experiencing isn't purely because of guilt,
Right.
because you feel bad for something that you did, and so it's bringing you down. But guilt is just one piece of this larger puzzle of depression.
Right.
You have inability to concentrate.
Right.
You have perhaps even
Memory loss.
suicidal
Right.
issues. You're going to have some cognitive interference, so difficulty concentrating and focusing and some
That's
of
a
those
big
kinds
one.
of things.
When you get depressed.
Yeah.
Concentration and memory and reading comprehension, understanding what people are saying to you, understanding directions, remembering where you put things.
Right.
There's a lot of cognitive effect.
Right. So with all of that, you have these major changes.
Right.
You have this withdrawal from other people, so a lack of interest in social engagements.
Right.
You have changes in sleep, changes in eating, changes in motor activity, difficulty concentrating, difficulty focusing. And so what you see is this big movement inward.
And it is a change.
Right.
You can say, well, I never like to go to parties. I don't like to interact with them. Well, then that's not what we're talking about.
Right.
If this is how you normally are,
Right.
then maybe it's not depression. We're talking about a change in how you normally feel, act, or behave.
Right.
Okay, and that's what we're looking for.
Right.
And, I used to like going out. Now, I just want to stay home and do nothing.
Right.
I used to be real active, and now I don't want to leave the house.
Right.
Those are changes in your normal routines.
Right.
That's what we're looking for.
Right. And that's, if you experience those things, and the diagnostic criteria it gets into a little bit more specificity, but if you experience those change, then we're likely talking about something called a major depressive episode.
Right.
All right? And you have to have a major depressive episode to meet criteria for a major depressive disorder.
Right.
Okay? That said, there is another set of circumstances where it isn't really a change. We used to call it dysthymia, but now we call it persistent depressive episode. Persistent depressive disorder. And this is where you have these symptoms, maybe not quite as severe as a major depressive episode, but you have those symptoms more days than not over the course of up to 2 years.
Right.
It's a year if you're a child or teenager, but it's up to 2 years if you're an adult.
It doesn't mean you have to have them for 2 years. It can be up to 2 years.
Well, you have to have it for a very long period of time before you meet criteria for the diagnosis. And so, in those circumstances, you're not seeing a big change, because if you've been like that for the past year, it doesn't seem like a change at all. It's just that's how it's been.
Right. That's a hard one too, especially in youngsters. You take a 12 or 13-year-old. Well, how many years? You don't have that many years that you're working with.
Right.
So it's a little bit more difficult in kids. Although that's what it looks like. If it's only been a couple of months, you need to be careful about making that diagnosis.
Yeah, absolutely. And so it's a lot of the same symptoms, but it's just over a broader period of time.
Right.
And again, it isn't quite as profound
Right.
as with the major depressive episode.
Yeah, you're functioning fairly well.
Right.
Near normal.
Right.
But
Yeah, you're getting
still
to
some effects.
You're getting to work, you're getting to school, you're
Right.
doing those things, but you're just not as engaged, not
Right.
as energetic or
That's
enthusiastic
right.
about things.
Without the enthusiasm that you once did them. We all have these things, and I talk to a lot of people about it, and they'll say, well, I used to really look forward to Friday nights because end of the work week, and we would go out, or my wife and I would go here, or I'd do this with the kids, or I'd do this with my friends, or we'd go golfing or something. And they will say, I used to love Fridays. Now I don't care at all. I don't want to do those things. I have no interest in those things. And I just go home and I'm quiet and I have a couple of drinks and I don't want to see anybody.
Right.
Sometimes I just sit in a dark room by myself. That's a pretty significant change. You
Yeah.
know, when you say you've been doing this for a couple of years and then all of a sudden you lose all interest in it.
Right.
That's a significant change that's probably worth talking to somebody about.
Absolutely.
And we could go on and on with those kinds of examples.
Right.
But I think the emphasis is on this is a big change in what normally happens to me.
Yeah, absolutely. And we will get more into some of these things later this week, especially on Wednesday, for example. We're going to talk about some of the biological causes of depression. But there are things that can happen in your brain and in your body that
Right.
can trigger symptoms of depression. And so we're going to talk more about that on Wednesday.
Right.
But it's, there are some biological roots. But on Thursday, we're going to talk about some of the things that can happen in your environment that causes, or things that happen to you that
That's
cause
right.
some of those symptoms.
Right. But what we want to move away from is this idea that depression is some kind of a chemical imbalance. It might be a chemical imbalance,
Right.
okay? But it might be many other things.
Right.
It could be many other things and it could have many other causes.
Absolutely.
You can be depressed without any neurochemical imbalance. And I think that's the important point is, number one, it's a change. And number two, it's far more complex than a neurochemical imbalance. The other thing, even if it is a neurochemical imbalance, it's still incredibly complicated because to explain mood and perception and daily experiences, how you experience life, from a neurochemical perspective, you're still talking about millions or billions of interactions in your brain.
Right.
You have hundreds of neurotransmitters, tens of thousands or millions of synapses, and it's even if it's just chemical, it's still far more complex than we typically think about depression.
Right.
So remember that it's more than chemistry, and it's a change.
Right. Now, tomorrow we're going to talk about the symptoms, some of the other symptoms of depression,
Right.
and we're going to talk about how those symptoms manifest differently at different ages.
Different ages, right? That's another layer of complexity.
Right. But the final point that I wanted to make today, and if you have anything remaining as well, the final point I wanted to make today, and this is going to be a recurring theme this week, is the fact that depression, the way that depression manifests and the way that it affects us emotionally and biologically means that it isn't something that you just stop.
Right.
You don't just say, you know what, I'm not going to be depressed anymore.
Yeah.
I'm tired of that.
Get over it.
Yeah, get over it. Just smile.
Right.
It doesn't really work that way. And there's a lot of credence for the idea of what do they say? Fake it till you make it. You got to pretend to be happy. If you pretend like you're happy, then it's going to make you happy. That works for some people, honestly.
Depends on what you have.
It depends, right? It depends on what's causing the depression or where that depression is rooted. So we're gonna return to some of those ideas throughout the course of the week. But it's just important that we say it from the outset that depression is not a decision. You're not deciding to be depressed. Not if you're really depressed. I mean, you can choose to act depressed, whether you are or not, sure. But when you're really depressed, it's not just a matter of making a decision to not be depressed anymore.
When you mention things like just get over it, or
Right.
think happy thoughts. I think of Peter Pan, the story of Peter Pan. Wasn't it in order to fly,
Yeah.
you had to think happy thoughts?
Yeah.
And I think this is more than being
Yeah.
able to fly.
Yeah.
It's more than just thinking happy thoughts.
Absolutely.
Right.
So, but again, we'll return to that throughout the course of the week. Did you have anything else?
I don't.
All right. Until next time, stay happy, stay healthy, and forget to be afraid. Thanks for sharing this episode of the Mental Breakdown and Psychreg podcast. Be sure to check out the show notes for links to follow us on Twitter and subscribe to our YouTube channel, where you will find all of our previous podcasts and much more. We would be honored if you would become a patron through patreon.com, where any donation you can manage will go to the development and creation of more content. Just visit patreon.com/thementalbreakdown for more information. Thanks again for listening. Have an awesome day, and we look forward to being back in your feed tomorrow morning.